I think anybody.
Did you all hear that?
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Oh,
we're fully informed.
here comes Susan. So
Good.
that's great. Oh, good.
Yay.
Thank
Right.
you for your patience, Susan. That was my bad.
Problem. Then I finally did get in, but then I was waiting in the waiting room for a while. So I thought but no matter what, it all eventually
It
worked.
worked out.
Hello.
Just so you know, Susan, we're recording today's session for Monica. She requested that we record it. So it is being recorded.
Oh, we better say smart things.
Yeah.
Intelligent things, I mean. You know.
I think
Well,
all we have to do is, we just have to disguise our voices.
There you go.
Please just say all your thoughts, because any criticism or comments about not liking a character or something missing is all useful and helpful to me. So don't, please don't censor yourself.
Monica, would you like to start by just telling us where your idea, your inspiration came from? I know that this is your business to counsel and work with people, but did you have a patient who would go to this extreme? So do you mind starting with that question?
Not at all. For quite a few years although I had a very busy professional life as a professor of medicine, and my specialty in psychiatry was consultation liaison with the general hospital, because I like all of medicine. So I was pretty busy with that. And I was also a principal and investigator on NIH grants. And so, and I have a family. So not that I had much spare time, but it began to percolate in my mind that I thought I would like to try to write a novel, in part because I wanted to give something back to the world of literature that I had gotten so much out of all my life. And it was just something I thought I might be able to do. And I never really had an idea for a theme for a book, like a novel that is going to take a lot of time over many years, since I don't have full time to write it. And then in a period of several months, I got consultations from the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology about a condition that I and most psychiatrists had not seen up to then, I think it was 3 women that had false pregnancies.
Oh, wow.
And so I saw one after, and then another one, and then another one. And so first I thought of it in terms of my biological psychiatric roots, and I invited an endocrinologist to do some hormone studies together with me, just to kind of see how this happened, because these women, not only did they have the big bellies, but they had all the other signs of pregnancy, and one of them was lactating, and it was really very, very strange. So we did that paper, and then it occurred to me, I said, it would be so interesting to write a novel where somewhere the main character develops a false pregnancy. And that's how it started. The book has nothing to do with any of the 3 patients. It's completely different. And then you sit down. So I sat myself down with a piece of white lined paper, and there's nothing there. So then you have infinity when you start writing. You could write anything. But as soon as you write the first sentence, and I wrote the first sentence, then everything gets circumscribed. It's no longer infinity. It's just a set of conditions that limit you to some degree, but you're still very, the idea of a novel was nice because I figured I could just wade around in it, and not like a short story where you have to, it's like brief therapy is harder than long-term psychotherapy because you have to focus in very quickly. So that's what started it.
Did
I was,
all
I
three
was
of
so
your
impressed.
patients-
Excuse me,
Pardon?
sorry. I was gonna say, I was so impressed that a physician could write a novel. I mean, you know, with all your busy schedule and everything that you have to do, serving patients and the hospital responsibilities, that you were able to write a novel. I was very impressed by that and really enjoyed the book.
Oh, thank you. It was
Mhm.
the kind of thing where I would write on the weekends. Although I have 3 children, so I have things to do on the weekend too. And I would just write little bits and pieces as I had time and as things came to me. And then when you really get into it, interesting things happen, because then I would sometimes wait. I began to put a pad of paper by my bed, because sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and either I've had a dream or something or other and an idea. So I would write it down in the middle of the night so I wouldn't forget it. Or sometimes I would have to go into work in the morning and I was writing an interesting section the night before. And I would say, okay, brain, I don't have time to work on you with this novel right now. You do it because I have to go to work. And by the end of the day, sometimes I would have a few sentences or a paragraph. So I learned from that. Our brain can do many things at the same time, even if we're not focusing on it.
And how did the patients fare? Just kidding.
The rest of them, while I was writing in my head.
Yeah.
Okay, because it was compartmentalized.
Did all three of the patients that inspired the story, was one commonality that they all fervently wanted to become pregnant and were sort of obsessed in some way with it, like Margot was?
They all wanted to be pregnant for different reasons. And what was interesting was that one of them, after the ultrasound, was willing to accept that she was not pregnant, but her boyfriend was not.
Huh.
So obviously he wanted a baby so badly that she, however she decided, or part of her brain decided that she would be pregnant. But he wouldn't say he would say, well, look over there on the, look over there, or, that could be something. And he just would not accept it. And then there was another one that I had to take into psychotherapy because she accepted it, but then a month later, she thought she was pregnant again. So I had to work with her to the point where when she would get that thought, which happened over time, she would begin to question it and just say, why am I having this thought now?
So can I ask, Monica, on the patient that had the increased size on her abdomen and was lactating, how did these symptoms finally go away? Was it after they accepted that they weren't pregnant, or what?
Yeah, if they accepted that they weren't pregnant, then they would expel a lot of gas, and they would accept it. And they would show them the ultrasound and show them that there was nothing in the uterus. And if they accepted it, their symptoms went away.
Wow.
And this woman that I had to keep seeing, she accepted it and her symptoms went away. But then a month later, she had the same idea that she was pregnant. She'd come back to OB-GYN. And after a while, she just called me, and then we worked, and then eventually she stopped when she was able to question herself.
I really liked it how all the aspects that you brought in, the psychiatry, the legal, I thought it was great. Bringing in all different aspects to it, the social component. That was excellent.
Oh, thank you. There were certain things that were easy to write, and other things I had to research a little bit, like the legal things. I wanted to have it go through the legal aspects of it, because in fact it's a crime. But I didn't know anything about that. And so what I learned while I was doing that is that every state is completely different. So I had to look up the state laws in Connecticut as to how this would come about. And I also learned how much power is in the hand of the district attorney about deciding on who to prosecute. And then I called up a friend who was a forensic psychiatrist and works with the law, and I passed it by him to make sure that it was, you know, legally accurate. And yeah, of course, the parts about the psychiatrist were easy for me to write. I just kind of put her in my chair and across from me, and I just talked to her and had a session with her. So that was very easy to write. But you know,
When you were, when you were writing about or trying to formulate how to write about the kidnapping, did you research into some cases, you know, because there certainly have been babies kidnapped, often from the hospital, from the neonatal center and all that, and particularly to kind of get as much background as you could on some of the motivation and what kind of women these are, because your book, you know, we could certainly see her side. You know, you could see the horror of the woman who lost her baby for that period of time till she got him back. But there's that whole other story of the woman really suffering and going into a psychological crisis. I was just
which
curious
woman,
if you kind of made
the mother of the baby, you mean?
well,
Or
no,
Margot?
no, the kidnapper. You know, the main character who was
Margot.
wanted a
Margot.
child, did the kidnapping. I just sort of wondered about the personality profiles or the cases you might have looked into of women who have done that, because it's such a big, serious step. And, you know, I don't think they're all crazy, so to speak. You know, I don't know. I'm really asking.
I didn't. I was just, you know, trying to think of this one person and her motivations. Likely there are many depending on the person. I don't think they're sociopaths who just go around taking
No.
babies for the,
Right,
you know, I'm
right.
sure they have different reasons why they do it.
Yeah, profit often, right?
So Monica, I stumbled when Margot first violated the code of confidentiality when she went into the record the first time. That really made me uncomfortable. I had this visceral feeling, and I just thought she was so smart that I wondered how you could make her stumble like that.
I don't know what you mean going into the record.
Me neither.
Well, she went early on in the book, there was something that she did that made her boss call her in and sit her down and
She went into the neonatal unit and watched the babies.
Yeah,
oh, is that
Without being entitled to be there.
right?
right.
And I knew that was wrong, and I thought, well, she should be smart enough to know that was wrong.
Oh, this was foreshadowing though of the urge.
That's
Right?
right.
But
I don't think right or wrong was a factor in her mind at that point.
Right,
This is
right.
a person. I think that you brought us very slowly into her going into this phase of being absolutely crazed, you know, about having a baby. So I think
Yeah.
Monica brought us into, at least for me, we were brought into it very slowly, where it sort of starts out as like not that big of a deal, and then it keeps getting worse and worse. And from my experience with some people, that's how some of their depression start, is that it's just a little bit to start with, and you know, then it just keeps going, you know, or a spiral down.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I like the structure very much. I just kept
Yeah.
getting pulled along and pulled along and pulled along. Uh, once I accepted that she was obsessive, I didn't like her very much at first, sorry, but that obsessiveness kind of, got me. But the structure was really great, I thought. Really plotted well.
Margot had childhood trauma, extreme trauma, and it, I guess that was something that I wondered if very many of your patients probably have had childhood trauma that helped to, or made them who, in part, who they were. And she seemed to, she wanted numbers. She loved spreadsheets. She was kind of a perfectionist about things. And I think her self-esteem was so threatened by her infertility. And could you just comment on some of those background pieces about that made Margot who she is?
Well, I'd like to hear what you all think. I'm just gonna hang out in the background for a while. If you just, and I'll answer, these things later, but you just have a discussion as if you were discussing any other book.
I would add another thing, Stephanie, that her mother-in-law didn't like her very well, did she? And that's why she thought if the mother-in-law knew about the infertility, that would be the last straw.
Oh, that's
and so that was a problem she had too.
And she truly loved her husband and knew how much he wanted a child,
Yeah. I'm real interested in what you men thought about the book, because in my mind, it was very much a woman's book with all these very, very feminine details like blood in the panties and the feel of the speculum and stuff. And I was just curious how you guys responded to that.
That's a little
Well, I mean, we're married.
That helps.
Yeah, I took note of that for sure, and appreciated the candor and the detail, though must admit it wasn't, easy to read in places. But I appreciated it, frankly, because it brought out aspects of a woman in that situation that obviously you wouldn't see on a commercial for some, fertility drug, or and you wouldn't read it in most books or anywhere else. So I like the fact that it was in there.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm glad it was this month's selection, but it's not a book I would pick up to read.
And it wasn't taken to the detail of, say, Hemingway's description of Paris. So I wasn't going there. Well, how many pages is this going to go on? So, thank you, Monica.
So Monica, can I ask you a question about, I don't mean there obviously are many things, but Margot is a fairly complex person. And I started thinking about how autobiographical this might be, because you say that she said, I like numbers. And then she said, I take pleasure in solving equations. No, not many people would say that about themselves, especially women. So when you take things like that, the complexity, and put them all together, you want a person to be consistent. And I'm wondering if to do that, you have to be autobiographical.
I don't know. I try to, for her, numbers are kind of an escape and a pleasure. And I don't think it is, maybe it's, I don't know how to put this. I don't think that pleasure in numbers is necessarily a male or a female thing. I wrote it in for her because it was something that she could do, something she enjoyed, something she could escape into. It was, everybody's got to have something.
I think what Richard's asking is, what did you get in calculus in college?
Oh, I was happy to get a C+. It was my lowest
Okay, so it's
grade.
not autobiographical in that sense.
Yet I
No.
thought it was good between, because her husband was a lawyer, things that are black and white, that might have been something that pulled the two together. I don't know.
Opposites?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, same. Black and white, black and white.
Oh, the law is black and white?
well, the
Was that
law
what
is
they
like
were saying?
proof.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Proofs are in math.
Good, yeah. Well, so I guess I enjoyed the book, Monica. Thank you for writing it.
Yeah.
I thought it was an easy read.
Yeah.
And there was some clever phrases that I underlined in my copy and enjoyed
Right.
reading those, especially the analogy with the hall in The Wizard of Oz. I guess there was allusion to that. I got a grin out of that. The one thing toward the end of the book, when we get to know a little bit more about the woman whose child was taken and her anger and her inability to get satisfaction to her level, I was worried that the end of the book was going to be the murder of Margot by this woman because
Yeah.
she had no other outlet. So,
Here.
and I guess I should thank you for not making that the ending. But I was expecting some sort of retribution rather than the resolution that you had them come to, and rather abruptly. You know, you didn't drag it out. They didn't have a long heart to heart and finally come to a reconciliation that they did apparently. So you were very brief in that regard. So
You would have liked more?
I think so. I was expecting more. You know, so that they both could have learned more about themselves. I think the conclusion was that they had, and they were both forgiving and understanding and you know, contrite and whatever else. You know, it all ended happily. But I thought you could have maybe, or I was expecting more to come out of that in terms of the character development, the story development.
Okay.
Oh,
I actually thought the ending was brilliant.
I did too. I
In
liked the
that,
ending. Yeah.
the problem was diffused by, and this is Amarato saying, he crawls fast as lightning. And Margot says, really? Fast as lightning? So
Yeah. Yeah.
no problem. The kid is fine. And I thought that was a brilliant way of diffusing the problem.
I thought so. That she took it interesting. I liked it.
I
But
found
I liked the title. I mean, it wrapped around to the title. The end of Miracles, I was telling somebody I was reading this book and they said, oh, that sounds awfully sad. And I said, no, I mean, the whole thing was an acceptance of the reality. And the end of the miracle was, well, if there was a miracle, it was the forgiveness, you know, but I just thought the ending wrapped up nicely. The end of Miracles, reality's been achieved. We'll go on from here.
Thankfully, everybody recovered, right? So I have I'm sorry, someone else was about to say something. And
I was going to say, I found this book in California in the Contra Costa Library, and I read it. Well, I got it, and I looked at the jacket, and I saw that it said University of Michigan physician. I went, oh, wow, I'm so proud of U of M. So I read the book, thoroughly loved it. I recommended it to the book group in California. So hopefully they'll read it too. So they do have copies around the country of this book, and it's very good, very well written. And I appreciated the passages and references to Freud. I thought that was quite interesting.
oh yes,
You all remember that, where you know, referring to the fact that women may feel this need to have a child one way or another
to make up for penis envy, or that's
yes,
Oh.
exactly. Like they're not fulfilled until they do have a child. And you know, there are many women who struggle with infertility and go through all these processes, IVF as she did, and they don't come out successfully. And they don't realize that there are other ways to fulfill themselves, not just a child. You know, there could be other ways. She said she worked with disabled or group home children. You know, she could have adopted one of them, you know, to fulfill her motherly maternal needs or whatever.
Yeah, come to think of it, how did you resolve the Janie business? So she had to stop seeing her for a while, but what was her status at the end of the book,
Oh,
Monica?
yeah, yeah.
She
Was
did,
that the
she
next,
did go
next
back.
novel?
I mean, she did go back.
Or did Janie just sort of continue along? She, you know, she'd suffered that trauma, and then Margot helped her through that to a point, and then Margot lost it. So,
That's right.
but she went back to visiting with Janie and continuing on with.
Okay, that's not clear. Okay, so
Right,
let me write
yeah.
that down. That's not clear to
No.
people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I wondered about that too.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think it did say though a little bit in there that she would ask her friend or the lady that heads it up, and she said she was in therapy and she was doing better.
Cecilia?
Yes, I thought I
Yeah,
remember reading
Cecilia.
there's
that.
a little sentence about that.
Yeah, but she asked how she was doing. And I think she asked her several times just to make sure she was okay, because she felt so horrible about not being there for her.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
She ran away. And when Jane, I think her name was
Janie.
Jane, her the most. But I know she asked. I remember that in the book. And the lady, I can't remember her name, said that
Cecilia.
she's
Okay.
doing better. Yeah, I remember that part.
I thought there were many interesting parts, and one was during the time that Margot was an inpatient, and like the second time as she started to be better and was sort of taking in a little bit more of the sort of program, like I have some goals today, kind of seeing some of the other patients and remembering when she was sort of like that. And I thought that that was kind of gave people insights into maybe what happens, you know, on an inpatient psychiatric unit. And it kind of was in contrast to like once she finally was able to accept some help, like early on, she had gone to Dr. Trainer, and said, no, thank you. She didn't want to go back for another session, she and her husband. And so it seemed like it was a turning point when, you know, the second time she came in after the bad incident. So anyway, I thought that that was a real interesting part, and how the doctor tried to think through it and make mental notes to herself and kind of write them down, and how Margot worked through it. Like, I thought that was really, really good.
So I know you're asking us not to ask you questions, Monica, but so one thing I wondered if you had considered for the ending of the book, that taking it a little bit further to the point where they adopted or had a surrogate mother, or somehow resolved the big, you know, gaping void in her life that way. So she came around, she recovered from her mental or psychiatric problems, and they talked about how they were talking to each other about having other ways of having children, but you didn't go there. So was that a conscious decision, or did you just there? Yeah, I'll ask that. Was that a conscious decision to end it without that sort of resolution?
It was. I didn't want to make it. How shall I put it? With a happy end, with a, you know, everything is happily ever after sort of an ending. So I tried to make it a hopeful ending. You know, that she was in a place that maybe she could consider some of these other things. She probably would maybe need more therapy and so forth. I guess, you know, a psychiatrist friend of mine was saying, well, you know, then what happened in the next few sessions or something. So you could go on endlessly with this. And then it could have been a psychotherapy kind of book, and some people may have liked it, and people may have said enough with the psychiatry stuff. So I tried to make an ending that was realistic and hopeful, but didn't tie everything up.
Well, it allows you open for a sequel, right?
Oh, that's
The beginning of the next miracle.
I
liked,
agree with you.
I like the development of her husband, of Margot's husband's over time. He's not, it seemed to me at first he wasn't a huge part of the story. It really focused on Margot. But then I think, you know, when she was going through her crisis, he was very supportive and he became, I think, more rounded out. His character personality was more fleshed out. And I think that contributed to the emotionalism of the book.
Yeah.
Even the woman whose baby was stolen, I kept thinking, you know, I want her to understand, like anybody reading the book understands about Mrs. Gerber and all her mental problems, you know, but because of HIPAA and that, you know, she's still angry, but yet she's accepted because of her church and other, you know, reasons, accepted what it was. But it's sort of like the struggles we all have with people. You want them to understand better, whether it's political, Republicans and Democrats or whatever. But you know, you knew she had a block and you couldn't get any further with her.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen a little more emphasis on that mom whose baby was stolen. And I mean, I also like the way it resolved. At least it wasn't a happy ending where they did get pregnant or who knows what. But getting back to that mom, you know, as I think of all that trauma, and I thought it was interesting when Margot's friends went to visit the mom, even when she went into the kitchen, was pushing the baby in a little stroller or something. Even in her own house, she was afraid to be separated from the baby at all times. So this terrible trauma that maybe over time she'll lessen up a little, but it pictured to me that it would be long. So I think the thing in the book that supposedly kind of turned that around was that session they had where they were supposed to meet and with social workers and, you know, try to share each side. And we've talked about that a little bit. And particularly when she started telling her about the baby. And I guess when the biological mom saw that Margot was interested in how the baby was really doing and realized that Margot had brought her to the kid to the hospital when the baby was sick because she was really worried about it. I guess that opened her up a little. But I would have liked to have seen more because part of me thinks that I can't, it's hard to believe that mom wouldn't have wanted some sort of justice done for the loss that she suffered. And even though maybe Margot is sick or maybe she's got these problems, and yes, we all wish she had a baby too, but she committed a crime. You know, I get it. And I hear how you tried to work around it. And I like the outcome, but I would have liked a little more, particularly from that mom's point of view of how she worked through it. I do realize, I think at the end, the husband was more online than she was, because the husband, I think, said, we're not going to prosecute. And she sort of grumbled, that's right, to, you know, something under her breath. So I thought that was probably accurate. Maybe she was just sort of going along. And maybe it's true if someone went through more legal processes, maybe it would drag it out for them. You know, maybe the mom is trying to heal up with the baby, and if she had to keep sort of reliving it in court or whatever, maybe that would be more traumatizing to her. Maybe that factored in, but we certainly didn't hear that in the book. And I don't know. It just felt like that would be the only thing. Because in general, I did love it. I thought it was good, and I was predisposed to like it because, hey, you know, one of our own wrote it, and I was thrilled because for other books we were talking about, oh my God, this book needed an editor, and that one too long, too short, you know. And I thought this one, the pacing was fine. So, but if we're going to nitpick a little and say what, you know, what I would have fleshed out a little more, maybe it was that character and her suffering.
To me, though, she seemed pretty disagreeable. I thought there was too much of her in there.
Too much of the mother of the stolen child?
Well, the child was stolen for
Okay,
less
that
than
one. I didn't
24
know which.
hours.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And it's not like it went on for weeks.
Okay, yeah.
For me, this is a book that I probably wouldn't have picked up to read, if I looked at the back cover and read the blurb. But since it was part of the book club, I was able to get a copy through the University of San Francisco Public Library. And I've found the humorous incidents about how Margot postulated how babies were born, and that the gifts were given by her father to the mother was very humorous at the start, and that got me kind of hooked. I found that the way that the nurses strike and Janie's situation with the sexual molestation carried the story along, giving you areas outside of the women's issues to keep you reading, so that it wasn't all just women's issues. I found that the biology of the pregnancy itself was interesting to read. I worked in the hospital, so it was interesting to see how the administration works versus the nurses, and the instruction of the medical students, and then the residents, and then the faculty, how that went together. I found that interesting. What else did I find?
If I could just amplify on that one point. So did anyone else find it ironic that the U of M nurses are about to go on strike, or they haven't had a contract since August? So
It never ends.
oh, okay. I thought it was something unique.
One thing
I was wondering if it had
Wait,
anything
wait.
with the strike back in the 90s. You know, they had that huge strike back in the 90s, and I'm like, I wonder if this has anything connection with that strike.
It certainly did. I can answer that question now because that's how I learned about all these issues. I was here when they had that strike, and all the things about, you know, crossing a picket line, which I was taught as a child that you don't do, at the same time needing to get to work myself. I learned about the issues of the nurses. I learned about the issues of the administration. Yeah, so I thought it was would be a good subplot, and I thought it would also be instructive. And I think I did it so that both sides feel they are fairly represented, because I think one of the comments on Amazon from a reader actually came from the person who was a hospital administrator. She was a woman, I forget her name now, but I was just reading along and she said she thought it was good to show. It's interesting, she said it was good to show the issues about a hospital administration, whereas our nurse here said that it was good to show the issues for nurses. So I feel like I did my job there.
Yeah.
So Harold, I cut you off, and I apologize. Did you want to say something
Yeah,
more?
there was one other thing that I was expecting to happen that never did. After her instance report for observing the babies in the neonatal unit, she went and borrowed those puppets to take to Janie to do the therapy to try and find out what happened to her. And after taking those puppets in a clandestine manner, I was expecting that to come back and bite her in the end, and then that she was going to lose her job because she stole those puppets to take to the shear house and work with Janie, and then that I kept on waiting for it to come and to come and to come, and it never happened. So
Yeah.
the other thing was I didn't really like the fantasy writing with the psychoanalysts of therapy. I didn't feel that really added to the story, in my opinion.
You did like it or you didn't?
I did not.
you didn't like the part where, like in the inpatient unit, or the fantasies of a Freud's meeting?
The italics, yeah.
Which
Yeah,
one?
the italics. I didn't like that section.
Okay.
I did, for what it's worth.
That's the usual, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
everybody.
I
These
was
things-
interested about the cover. When I first looked at the cover, it was many months ago, I thought it was spooky. Kind of like a little, not like exactly Rosemary's Baby, but like really bad. And I was just wondering, you know, how it, you know, I'd be interested if you have time at some point in this conversation to talk about like the development of the cover and the choices and all of that.
Okay, I can answer that now.
Actually, before you do, I have to go at 4. I've got a hard stop there. And it's interesting, Stephanie, that you bring up Rosemary's Baby, because I was thinking about whether to raise this or not, and so I will. Had you considered either, you know, what occurred to me when the child was born, prematurely or not, my mind went to Rosemary's Baby, and that this kind of could have been the devil's spawn, you know, this kind of thing. And now, since our discussion started, perhaps that could be another way to go with a sequel. You know, that this is crazy, and I'll admit it, it's wacky, so you didn't say any more about it. And on that note, I have to leave.
Okay, go, but let me just say, before you do, I'm hopeful, and I'd appreciate it if everybody who's on here would write a couple of sentences or a few words for Amazon and Goodreads if you're on it, and give it some stars, because the algorithms do look at how many comments there are. So please take a few minutes, just write a sentence or two or whatever you want on those two things.
I
And I'd
looked at
appreciate
some reviews. You get some pretty good reviews, not necessarily just on Amazon, but just book reviews. In general, they thought it was a book and a topic not often written about. So good for you.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, I certainly had imposter syndrome. Now, you probably remember when you're an intern, you have imposter syndrome.
Oh,
All of a
yeah.
sudden,
What do you mean?
you're a doctor and you don't know
Uh-huh.
anything, and you
You
know.
know,
So I had,
Yep.
so with this one, once it was in press and everything, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I this is coming out as a novel, and who am I? And it was only when some of those professional reviews started
Yeah,
coming in
they were good.
and saying that, you know, the pacing was fine and the writing was fine, and you know, it was great. So only then did that dispel.
Good, good. Yeah.
Well, good for you. Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank
So I
you.
got to go. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. See you
Good to
guys.
see you, Ted.
Thank you.
Okay, so to answer the question about the cover, so the publisher has a cover design person. And so what they do is they ask that cover design person to make a few covers. And then usually the publisher decides. And because this is a smaller press, I was part of the process. I mean, in a bigger press, they could have put one of those guys with the long hair that's on the wrong novels, and I couldn't say anything, but I was part of this process. And I have to say, the initial title of the book that I had in my head as I was writing it was Conceptions, because it has a double entendre kind of thing. It was real conceptions, false conceptions, conceptions as thought. The cover designer says, I cannot make a cover with that title.
Really?
So the publisher and I sort of got together and tried to think of other titles, and the publisher came up with a few that I didn't like, and then she suggested something like The End of Miracles, and I said, you know, I think that would be a good title. So then that went with a little synopsis of the story to the cover designer. And the cover designer then submitted 4 or 5 covers, and they were quite different and could have emphasized different parts of the story. One of them that I remember was a woman's face with 5 different, profiles in the face, whatever. So it almost looked like a split personality kind of thing. So that would have emphasized more the mental illness part of it. But the publisher and I both thought that this cover had an emotional people would have an emotional reaction. We did. We had an emotional reaction. You had an emotional reaction. And so we both wanted this cover. So that's how that happened. The cover designers are amazing. I mean, I've seen the covers for other books with this publisher, and then there's another person who designs the inside of the book. And something I never really looked at, like where the page number and is it underlined? Is there a bar at the side? Things like how is the first letter of each chapter started? Things like if there's space in between a few paragraphs, is there a little marker if the scene changes within a chapter? All things I never thought of, and the interior design person does all of that.
Monica, it seems like a lot of novels are 385 pages. And I wondered if that was a consideration or something that your editors had you keep in mind.
Not really. I didn't. And it's interesting because the price to print one book obviously depends on the pages. And I have no idea where the cutoff is from one price to the other. I just wrote it, the way I thought it should be written. At the very end, actually, I threw out a chapter and had to change all of my chapter numbers because I had been proofreading each chapter, and not proofreading, but going over each chapter as its own individual self. And then at the very, very end, I read it from start to finish. And I noticed that the second chapter just stopped the flow. It was kind of like if you would write a symphony, and the symphony has to go from the beginning, the first movement or whatever has to go from the beginning to the end. And so I thought of it that way. And once I got to the second chapter, it just kind of fell flat. I think she goes to visit Kate and they talk, and the momentum was lost. So I took the critical parts in that chapter and put it somewhere else and just dropped it.
Oh, interesting. Right.
I learned a lot through this whole process. Obviously, I had never taken a single course in creative writing. And but I read a lot of books. And so there were certain things that carried through from my scientific writing, which is completely different, obviously, writing grants and papers. But I learned how to edit. I didn't learn how to write, but I learned how to edit. And like when you're writing a grant, every sentence has to, in my mind, every sentence has to push the funding agency towards thinking they should fund this grant. So I brought that over also, thinking that I was, this sentence is superfluous, or it doesn't really add to the story or whatever. So I brought the editing part. What I didn't bring was the creative part, because I never had written creative fiction. So what I started to do is when I was reading novels on my own, I started to look at the technique as well as just reading the story, because I would know what was wrong, but I wouldn't know how to fix it when I was writing. I'd say, I don't know how to change tense. I don't know how to, do this or whatever. And so then as I was reading, I would say, oh, that's how they did it. or look at that, that's how they move from present tense to past tense in a little paragraph or something or other. So that's how I taught myself. By trial and error. I went through, I don't know, I can't tell you how many different versions of this there have been, and how many times I must have had 30 or 40 different I don't even know what to call them, but it wasn't easy. It took many, many years. And as I learned more, it got better and better. I could fix things I had written previously that I didn't like so much. And it was a process. I tried reading some books on writing, and I didn't find any of them particularly helpful. And the one thing that I found helpful is Stephen King has a book called On Writing. And it is a combination of an autobiography and some things about writing. And one of the things he said was something I had found out for myself, which is to use a thesaurus or a book of synonyms. A book of synonyms that I had, and what I would find is that, and I guess he agreed. I wish I had read that sooner because, I found myself that many times I would be writing a sentence and I would get stuck because I couldn't think of the right word. I knew the general word, but I needed a specific word, and I couldn't go on unless I had the specific word. And so then I went to the thesaurus or the synonym finder, and I would look up the word and then see what synonyms, and then I'd find the right synonym, and I say, that's it. And then the rest of the sentence would flow. So there was a lot of learning along the way.
Boy.
A win-win.
Yeah.
It was excellent.
Oh,
Monica,
know-
when did you start writing the book?
Pardon?
When did you start writing the book?
Oh, I don't know. I was just, let's see, my oldest child was still home, I think.
Yeah, because you referred to the children, and I know how old your children are.
Right. And so actually my oldest child was quite important in writing this book, because I wrote the first chapter and I really didn't know if it was any good or not. And my oldest daughter, who's an ophthalmologist now, but at the time she was, I don't know if she was in college or high school. But I knew she read a lot, and we could talk about books. And so after I wrote the first chapter, I gave it to her to read. And I said, I wrote this, I wonder if I should just keep writing or what. And so she read it, and then she said, it's good, you should keep writing.
Oh, how nice.
So she didn't write the book last year.
No, it's been many, many years. And then after I retired, then I had, I think the book is published now, it's 2016 or something. Gosh, it's been quite a while. Yeah, so I had more time
2016.
after I retired to really spend more time on it and finish it to my satisfaction. There's no, I think any writer is going to say there's no end point. I mean, you could just keep improving it and improving it, but there's some point where you have to say, that's it.
Right.
And then, if, as I was writing it, then my other goals, I added to my original goals that I wanted to first show psychiatry and psychiatrists in a positive light, because most of the books, you can start with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and then go through all the girl books, the girl who, whatever, I forget the name.
The Hornet's Nest.
The Hornet's Nest and all of those. And there's this Dr. Teleborian, who's an abusive child psychiatrist in that one. So I just wanted to present something that was more realistic. And then I also wanted to show that patients with psychiatric illnesses are really not that different from other people. So I added, so those, you know, as I was writing, I also had those things in the back of my mind.
Did your editor start, making changes that you were concerned about, or were you your own editor essentially? How did that go?
Well, I was pretty much my own editor, but when I submitted this to the publisher, she said that, I guess there's several classifications of books. One is it's not ready at all, and it needs like developmental editing, which is one kind of editing where people, the editor really helps the person develop it. So it wasn't in that category. And the second category is it may need a copy editor, which is usually the case. And a copy editor is different than a proof editor, which is something I learned. A copy editor looks at inconsistencies or how the book might be divided into sections or chapters or things like that. A proof editor just kind of compares the manuscript to any typos or anything. And then and then there's a category that's ready to go. Well, you can imagine almost nothing goes through, it's ready to go. So she said mine was between the first and the second kind, and could probably benefit from a copy editor. So I went to our school of where people get a Master's of Fine Arts and Creative Arts. And I asked if they could recommend somebody to be a copy editor. And they recommended somebody who teaches English literature at somewhere. Where does she teach? I can't remember where, not at the U of M. And she was wonderful. Polly Rosenwake is her name. And it was a delight to work with her. We changed some of the chapters. Again, I wasn't sure because some of it is in past tense and some of it is in present tense, and how to make that shift from one part of the book to the other. And then she just went through it page by page and just looked at if there were inconsistencies or whatever. So that was a very useful and interesting process. And I never knew there was a difference between a copy editor and a proof editor, but I feel like I got a PhD in writing and in publishing and in marketing and in all kind of things. So if anyone doesn't have any more comments, I could answer some of these points that you raised, if you like.
I have something very little.
I have a quick,
Little.
In the beginning, it refers to Grenada. And I think there was a bit of a mix up there because Grenada, spelled Grenada, is the country, the spice island, whereas Granada is actually a place in Spain. And so that.
And nobody caught that. Grenada is in Spain and Grenada is in the Caribbean.
Right. And forgive me, I am picky.
Well, you see, somebody should have picked that up. Either the copy editor, well, probably the copy editor, because the proofreader, just as I said, just compares what's in the manuscript to what's in the galley proof. So, yeah. The other thing that happened was then I had to proof myself the audiobook. I don't know how many of you listened to the audiobook.
I did.
Yeah.
I was curious. Did you get to pick the narrator, the person who read it? Did you consider reading it yourself? Because sometimes authors do. No?
I didn't. I don't know. I don't know if I would be good at what she did. That was an interesting process because when you go with Audible, it's easy because the first thing they do is say, do you want a male voice or a female voice? Do you want an authoritative voice or a friendly voice? Do you want a high-pitched voice or a low-pitched voice? And they give you a few things to select from. And then after that, they give you a list of 100 narrators.
Wow.
And then that fit the characteristics. And then I just under narrators. So I listened briefly to many of them. And I, after a few sentences, I could say or not, because they have recorded things. You listen to things they've recorded of other things they've read. And so I ended up with 2 or 3 that I really, really liked. And I got in touch with one of them. And with Audible, you can do it 2 ways. You can either pay them for their narration and producing it good enough for Audible, or you can do a profit share. Not that the profit is that big, but whatever, you can share your profit and not pay anything up front. So I chose that option, and this person was willing to do it. And she was an actress previously, and I think she did a beautiful job.
Yes.
An absolutely beautiful job. And I know 1 or 2 people who that I know of that read the book and then listened to the Audible, and then they said they really liked the book, but they loved it on Audible.
I did too.
So if you would, for all the people who got the free link to Audible or didn't, they in return, Audible would like some comments, and it's often about the narrator. So along with the link came something, I think, I'm not sure how they want people to do that. But they particularly want comments about the narrator, and I think she was so good. Really. What did you think? You thought she was good?
Oh, I did too. It just moved right along. It was, if it doesn't draw attention to itself, it just feels so natural. It feels like this is the way it should be, so yes.
I got the Kindle version of the book, and the Audible version came for another few dollars, and I got both. I actually liked reading it better. I can read faster, and the book was very well written and very well organized. And I felt that by reading, I got a lot more out of it than listening to it. I mean, I can go back now and listen to the whole thing again, but first time through, I thought reading was better. I knew in the past some of the other books we've had that it sounded like the Audible version was the better version, but this is the only time I actually tried to compare the two, and I really liked reading better. Sorry.
Well, that's also an interesting thing about how people like to read something. To me, I can't even read it on a Kindle. I need to hold the book in my hand, and I feel I get more immersed in it that way. At the same time, this is the first Audible thing that I've ever listened to, or any audio book, because I had to I can't say proofread it. You have to proof hear it. I don't know what, and that's how I got into this, because she mispronounced the French restaurant. She did everything. I didn't have to correct about anything else, but she couldn't pronounce the French restaurant, La Maison, or whatever it is that I have in there. But other people, I don't know how you can listen to the audio version and cook or whatever people do. I have to, the reason I like a print book is I can just kind of immerse myself in it. So, but in itself, it's an interesting thing to think about. What versions do people like and why?
By the way, I think we have a book discussion coming up about the Trevor Noah book. Is that right?
Yes.
I would definitely recommend that you listen to it because of his accent and the representations of other languages.
He's good at that.
I read it the first time, and I was sort of middle of the road. It was a 5 to me, I mean, out of 10. And then my friend said, "Oh, you must listen to it." So I'll go along with that recommendation, that you may enjoy it more if you listen to that Trevor Noah book. But Monica, I wanted to ask first, I reviewed your book on Goodreads, but should I also do it on Amazon?
Yes, please, because they're totally different. And if you've bought anything on Amazon for $50 in a certain period of time, you can review anything. So you don't have to have bought the book on Amazon. They
Okay,
will write verified purchase if you have. But if you're an Amazon customer, you can just go onto it and write a little review or comment or whatever, even if you didn't buy it that way.
and I just wanted to say that I thought you did just an excellent job of capturing both the physiological and the psychological components of infertility and miscarriage, which I've had many friends who have gone through both. And as I listened to their experience and I read the book, I was really taken by how true the emotions that you conveyed were to the experience that have been shared with me.
I'm very glad to hear that, because I'm hopeful that this is educational also, not just about psychiatric patients, but about how meaningful and how difficult and earth-shaking this infertility and miscarriage issue is to people. And it's often, both the infertility and miscarriage and the mental illness are usually kept in the shadows and they're not out in the open. And that was another hope. We just have to get enough people to read it. That's the other hard part of all of this, but that was the goal. So
And I have recommended it to another book club. I belong to a Dexter Ann Arbor book club, and I've recommended it to my book club too.
Oh, good. And I'm happy to join book clubs with video.
I told them you might be.
I am. I enjoy talking with book clubs. So let me tell you a little bit while we still have a bit more time. Men, in terms of men, I've had men who I know who read the book, and one of them said, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I've gone through labor for the only time in my life." And some of them have just read it in 15 hours or whatever. They just keep going because they say they learn a lot about women and women's issues that are interesting to them. It's interesting about some of the comments you made about where you would have liked to hear more about her husband, Stephen, and this woman whose baby was kidnapped. The book was optioned by a producer in London several years ago, quite a few years ago. Another thing I've learned about how another industry works, who got me through my website. I was told I had to have a website. What do I need a website for? I'm a professor of psychiatry, but because of the novel, I had to have a website. And this person actually contacted me and says, has someone optioned the novel yet? It's like I have a big line outside the door. So I said no. And in fact, she was a wonderful person. I was thinking of sending it out, but she actually did apply first. And so first she wanted to make a film of it, and now she's thinking of a television miniseries. And she works for Warner Brothers, so it wouldn't be through Warner Brothers. And she and another producer have been working with it, and the other one read it, and they've been talking about, if it was 3 or 4 different episodes. What they would like to expand is more about the husband and more about the backstory of the woman whose baby was taken.
Wow.
Very
interesting.
So that was interesting. And then I had to have a contract. I had to hire an entertainment lawyer. I've never seen a contract. I don't know anything about business. I don't know anything about contracts, but I had to learn all of that. A friend of mine who, I don't know if you read her book, The Historian. It was,
Oh, I have.
Oh, yeah.
written by Elizabeth Kostova.
Uh-huh.
So I said, what do I do? I have to get an entertainment lawyer. So she recommended me to her entertainment lawyer. And so then I worked with that person. That was an education in itself. So anyway, I have in the contract, I said I have to have in the contract that I have say over the script because I have to know that it is going to be accurate psychiatrically and so on and so forth. So whether it ever happens, I have no idea. This industry is so strange that projects get dropped after 5 or 6 years. But we'll see. So that has to do with the people who made comments about they'd like to learn more. They might if this actually becomes a mini series and the screenwriter will write more of that. Let's see. I tried to do the inpatient unit. I wanted to give some sense of the psychiatric background, but I didn't want to make it boring just to kind of in a description. And so that's why I had it set at the psychiatric inpatient unit meeting, which do exist. These kind of meetings obviously do exist, but that's why I had the resident instruct and the faculty person kind of give some of the background. So I made it in a dramatic format rather than simply saying, well, these were the psychiatric issues of this person. Anything else? Let's see.
I think the times are probably pretty opportune for this topic. That it would be, anywhere you want to look at it with the abortion rights, reproductive rights, problems with IVF. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, the producers obviously think so.
Yeah.
And I have faith in the one who optioned it because we've talked quite a bit, and I just wanted to make sure that she was on the right path with it. It wouldn't be commercialized. It would be as the book is, and she's very sensitive to those issues, and I feel that she will do a good job with it. The other thing I learned is, maybe you've wondered why they always have the casting director. It comes up early in the credits because after they get a screenwriter, the next thing is the casting director, because they have to know what people are available and all kind of things, which I never realized the casting director was such a prominent and important part of the process. I also learned that the reason sometimes you see something that says director's cut, it's because the producer has the final say over the final script and the final everything, which I didn't realize before. Because so when I had this clause put into the contract, it says that I have these rights over, the content, of the final script, except for the producer. The producer has final say. Now, that's why I was careful about making sure that this producer is actually somebody who I trust. But that's why sometimes it says director's cut, because what came out in the movie may not have been what the director wanted, but the producer may have thought something's more commercial or whatever, and insisted certain things be dropped or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad so many of you enjoyed The End of Miracles.
I did.
Oh, yeah, it was a good one. It was good. And I always love discussions where the author is present. I mean, really,
Special treat.
it adds 100%. And like I think I mentioned before, Reese Witherspoon has a monthly book club. And after she announces the book, she always, well, of course, she's got, all the stuff at her hands to be able to do it. She always has an interview with the author, one author interviewing the author of the book. And that's always fascinating because this background information just adds a lot to it. So thank you for participating. And
Okay, and if, again, if you
Mhm.
know book clubs you want to recommend it to, I enjoy being online with book clubs.
Great.
I have asked a question about how you developed Margot's character and starting with her trauma in childhood. I don't know if you want to go back and you thought maybe you'd save that question for later. Do you have anything to share with kind of how you built Margot from childhood on?
Well, knowing where she would end up, but then I have to go back and create her childhood. So I tried to build in things about her insecurity as a female, such as comparisons with her sister and the whole thing with the bras and the training bras, and then her mother, seeing her mother pregnant and her father being interested in the mother for that, and her watching women nurse babies and things of that sort. And for the psychiatric part, and this is the one thing that did come from one of the women that had pseudocyesis, false pregnancy, that she did have this relationship with her father, and when her father died, she you know, at the funeral, she couldn't be pulled away from the casket. So so I built that into the story also. That's about the only detail from these women who were completely different from Margot. So, and then I also tried to build in that at some point, I can't remember where it is, that she steals some comic books. So I wanted to build in some impulsivity and some ability to steal things that that were part of her. So a lot of these things are very subtle, and they're sort of little efforts of mine to plant things that would be clues to her personality and clues to some of her issues about being a female.
Yeah.
There were lots of good clues, I thought, in your details.
Good, because I wanted to make the whole thing seem reasonable, because it is such a strange action and everything. So I did try to put them in, and many of them may be subtle. I hope they helped people accept all the things. Some people get shocked when she takes the baby, because they say, how are we going to sympathize with somebody who does that? So I was pleased that most people don't dislike her because she did something so criminal. And so, you know, when we think about it, if it happened to us, as we think about this other woman, and that's why she goes on a crusade to try to get a criminal indictment, and she doesn't get anywhere with it, so which is obviously very frustrating. But that's why I tried to have her, I tried to have all the characters grow through this. Margot, her husband, her friends, and also a little bit this woman could move to sort of a grudging, you know, when she realized that she cared for the baby and she did take it for medical care, sort of a grudging, she threw her a little crumb.
Is someone willing to be the reviewer who writes up a little something for the newsletter of this book?
You can have a copy of this whole discussion, so you don't take it easy, right? Because it's all recorded.
I'm going to stop recording now. Is that okay?